All right, talk about when the female's on the nest and the male is killed. Dun, dun, dun.
Well, in those cases, if it's red-winged blackbirds, there's all those extras around the territory that we mentioned in the previous segment that they can fill in quickly.
Okay.
But sometimes they may just have to entice a male in, and they will do that, thereby gaining help to raise the young.
Marriage entrapment?
Yeah, it's sometimes called "I'm having your baby" syndrome. You know, the male thinks he's the part of the family now, but he really is just being used to bring food.
Okay.
You know. Probably not unheard of in the other parts of the world either. You know.
What are some of the other behaviors that we see that?
Well, it could be called prostitution.
Okay.
There are female birds that will give sex if you bring food. Ospreys are an example of that. They're fish-eating birds. Some of the hummingbirds are like that too. There are threesomes, and it makes good sense in these cases. In the Galapagos Islands, most of the Galapagos hawks, there are 2 males with a female.
Okay.
This is just to help bring in food for raising the young.
Okay.
So that works for them too.
Okay. How about Harris hawks?
They live in the southwest part of the United States. They do some of the same thing, and they also are cooperative hunters. People have watched them chase rabbits, and a rabbit will go into a brush pile or someplace to hide, and the hawks goes over and sits on a tree or a post, and the other one harasses from this side, trying to get them to run out, and if they do, then the second one nails them.
You're done.
Yeah.
How about hybridization in the bird world? Do we see that?
Probably happens a lot more than we might think. We've got blue-winged and golden-winged warblers, which are quite similar. If they mate, we get a bird called a Brewster's warbler. In the ducks, there's a lot of that happens. It's thought that maybe our American black ducks are getting fewer in numbers because of that.
Is that a melanistic black duck?
It's a darker duck, yeah. It's not real black. A lot of people miss it because it looks a lot like a mallard.
Oh, really? Okay.
But it's different enough to you can tell the difference, you know. We've even had pine siskins and crossbills, 2 very different kind of birds in a sense, and that have raised young.
But in most cases, the species are pretty closely related.
It's more common that way. Yeah. In the 90s, there was a scissor-tailed flycatcher and a western kingbird, both of which are not common in Minnesota, although more western kingbirds than flycatchers of that kind. And they built a nest. It got destroyed in a storm. They built another nest, but they never laid any eggs or raised any young. So that was just something kind of strange.
Okay.
And that raises a whole question of how we decide what's a species.
Right.
We got 2 ways that are commonly used and argued for. One's called a biological species concept. Most of those people say if there's hybridization, we should say that's one species. And we did that sometimes. Out west there's a Bullock's oriole, and here in the east and the Midwest we have the Baltimore oriole.
Okay.
And somebody found hybridization, and they said, oh, must be one species. So for a while the Baltimore oriole was called the northern oriole, and the Baltimore oriole phase, or the Bullock's phase. Then DNA studies said, you know, there's enough difference here that
it can be its own.
They can be their separate species, and they now are once again, too. But it's argued the other way that we should use a phylogenetic species concept. And that says, you know, even if there's hybridization, that doesn't make them one species, they should be 2. But since we still largely do the first way, we have about 10,000 species in the world of birds. I've heard somebody who's an expert in this area give a talk and said if we would follow the phylogenetic system, we would have about 15,000 species in the world. And people who are listers would love that. They'd end up with so many more species on their list. Yeah.
And a lister is somebody who keeps track of the species they have seen.
Yeah, they have a life list, a yard list, etc.
Okay.
All kinds of lists.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Talk about the urge to mate.
Because it's largely hormonal.
You likened it to the junior hires.
Yeah, that we talked about in the previous segment. But for example, someone took a mounted, stuffed female flicker.
Okay.
And just perched it out on a branch. And a male came along and mounted that.
Okay.
You know, now the tricky and fun part of that was, after a few of those attempts, he went and on the female flicker he painted in like a mustache line here, which the male has.
Okay.
So now this male comes back, he's going to mate again, and he sees that. And as the researcher said, it seemed like he flew off in horror, you know, because this is a male, not a female.
Right. But there are some odd behaviors that birds exhibit in the mating process.
Yeah, some of it's not even very nice. Mallards have been known to rape, so to speak, females. Even if it's a gang rape, you'll find sometimes several males chasing a female.
Yep.
And they've even drowned females in that process.
Yeah, because you see them grab them by the neck with their bill.
Yep.
Okay.
There are cases where the young get killed. Barn swallows, tree swallows, house sparrows will kill the young. Then you can breed again, kind of thing.
Okay.
The reason is much like members of the cat family. House cats,
Yeah.
you know, the tomcat, or lions in Africa. Males, if they find a female with young and there's no other male around, they tend to kill the young. That means they'll have this opportunity then to mate with this female. Yeah.
Okay.
So, the real strange ones, a couple are there's a lesbian situation that's been observed particularly in western gulls. That's not just gulls out on the west side of the United States, but a specific species called western gulls.
Okay.
Where it seems like two females get together. This is not the most common system, but it happens much more than one time. Pretend to copulate, then go off and get fertilized by some other male, come back and the two of them raise young.
Okay.
But they're only about 50% as successful. So it's not the greatest way to raise.
Okay.
And the opposite, we've had species observed of what we'd call gay birds. A couple of hooded warbler males built a nest. But they're not going to be able to lay any eggs.
Right.
But a female hooded warbler noticed the nest. She laid an egg in it. A cowbird came along and also laid an egg in it. And these two males raised those two birds.
Huh.
So there's a lot of strange things out there, and it's not just one kind of pattern. So if you want to learn more about this, you can read, but what would be a lot more fun is to do a little observing out there.
Yeah, do some observing, and everything is backed up by DNA these days. Going back even before we were able to do that with computers and with the science that we have now, I mean, was most of it just determined through documentation and observation?
Just observation, yeah, which meant field work, and it took a long time to collect enough data. So now it gets much easier with DNA. Yeah.
Is this a talk that you'll give to kids who come out here to Wargo Nature Center?
No. I've given this to the staff here and at other places, but it's a little beyond children.
Yeah, I think so.
Probably a lot beyond children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much. Bob Holtz is our adult education specialist and ornithologist here at Wargo Nature Center. You too can come and learn from Bob, and we appreciate you watching Anoka County Today.